Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Fission radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. This is Lonnie Clark with the Age of Fission radio show, Fission. Thank you for joining us, and I want to thank you as I cut my teeth as being an activist. I have to say I have been actively engaged in understanding the nuclear lies for just about 3 years, since May 5th, 2012, when I had a nightmare. And I went to the internet and discovered that Fukushima was really not handled. That's when I started to get my, as I call it, edumacation. And I have just been unpeeling onion after onion and realizing we are sitting in a stew of toxic worms. Like, this is just unbelievable denial by really the military, who is promoting uranium mining and the use of nuclear weapons and nuclear technology for the benefit of war profiteering. And today on Monday, as Mondays, you know that I've sort of dedicated this show to St. Louis, to the issues of St. Louis. St. Louis is on fire. Westlake Landfill has a fire. There's a nuclear waste dump site there that most likely the nuclear waste is on fire, and the EPA is just, as usual, not telling us. We're on a need-to-know basis, and we don't need to know while people are dropping off like flies all around the St. Louis airport. Today I have on the radio with us, so we're going to be sharing the airtime with Mr. Larry Burgen, who starred in a documentary, who was one of the stars of a documentary that was done about St. Louis. It's called The First Secret City. Now, Larry is not from St. Louis. He's from across the river, but the issues are the same. So let me just introduce Larry right away. Thank you, Larry, for joining us. I really appreciate your efforts and activism.
Hello, Lonnie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you for joining us. I have to say it's, we have to decide that we're going to be happy. That's why I said that in my intro. Happiness is resistance, because the people that are perpetrating these crimes against humanity, they want us to feel upset, disenchanted, unhappy, because unhappy people are easy to manipulate. So it's really important for us to keep our spirits up, and that's one of the things in the few times I've chatted with you that I totally appreciate is your attitude is so awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
They say they use these radioactive materials to benefit us. Well, it didn't benefit me and coworkers and the employees and residents at this factory over here in Illinois. It actually, having the government using that term, this is something to benefit mankind, to benefit to power your homes or whatever excuse. It's the cost-benefit analysis afterwards is what they don't take into effect. And that's the bad part of radiological materials, everything to do with radiation. The one thing about our factory, which is what I want to discuss today, is it's located over there in Madison, Illinois. If people want to look this up later, they can MapQuest it and see it for themselves. It's at 1001 College Street, Madison, Illinois, 62060. And it's a huge complex. And that's what I'd like to talk about today is the factory itself, because this is what started the production of this radioactive material on our side of the river. Now, everybody may have known or may not, the radioactive waste over at Westlake Landfill was also created by malachite. Now, the part of the radiation that was created in our factory also came from malachite. So this is another branch of that tree from Weldon Springs, malachite itself, that reaches across the river to us. And as you know, many branches from malachite goes all over St. Louis area.
Mm-hmm.
So with this factory over here, it's like a well-known secret, to the local residents. And what I mean by that is they sort of know it's been there for years, but they don't know what they've ever been doing inside. And us employees, as being one of them, we knew what they was doing inside, but we was never told the seriousness. And I'm quite sure, we're not the first that, we was kept in the dark about this information, about this radiation. And that's why I was wanting to discuss today is how this all started in this part of the St. Louis area over here.
Yeah, that would be really valuable. How did it all start? Give us a little bit of a insider's viewpoint on that one.
Well, the factory actually was built in World War II to produce Army tanks. And old-timer, an employee inside the factory, told me him and his brothers used to fish out there in the pond. And then one day, they come in and they built this factory on top of it. And that was the the World War II plant. Now, there's two steel factories behind it. One of them would make the bottom half of the tank, and the other steel factory would make the top half for the turret. Then they would transfer them over to the factory I worked in, and they would assemble it into an Army tank, then drive it across the street to an Army depot, then ship it off to war. So that's what the factory was actually built for. And so it's a very old building, and it has different manufacturing process because it was built for the war. It has nothing but windows everywhere to let light in and concrete roof. Now, this was built specific for war production because if they ever was bombed, the bombs would hit the concrete roof and explode instead of going through and hitting the machinery and destroying it inside. And having all windows around the structure means if it would blow up inside, it wouldn't blow the building down, it would just blow the windows out. So these were two structures of this building that play into effect of this radiation. The concrete roof soaks it in, and the windows let it escape.
Wow!
Something that was never considered when it was, when it was built back in the building Army tanks in World War II. And in fact, this factory, by all means, was built to produce death. The problem is, it kept producing that death long after the war ended, in the victims of the employees and the residents.
Yeah, long after World War II ended. Is that what you mean, World War II? Or,
yes.
I mean, you said it was built in World War I
World War II.
World War II.
Yes.
And they just converted it into a place to process uranium. What did you guys do exactly in there? Do you know what you did?
Well, I have a contract dated 1951 where Dow Chemical bought this factory from the military. And I actually have the page where it says that Dow will have unrestricted and unlimited use of uranium and thorium production. It's in the contract itself.
Wow.
And, it was quite amazing that it was in there. And from all the documentation, again, everything I worked through is from documentation. I have paperwork that shows that in 1955, they started production of thorium, radioactive thorium. And when I mean production is they started melting it in huge pots and making ingots. And this went on until year 2000.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I actually stood there, and I was pulled up on my fork truck one day and watched them melting it. And the employees wasn't wearing nothing, no badges, no mask, nothing but the same coveralls they wear every day. But they did have these little flags tied around barrels sitting around it. And like one employee told me, he goes, well, that smoke didn't stay within those flags. I don't know what they even put them up there for. So they never put no badges on. They never took any readings. And I was there. I know. I saw it.
Wow.
But back
Is
in the
this
50s,
plant still in production? Is it still an active open plant?
well, that's what I need to get to. Once I started getting ill and a couple other coworkers, they decided to get rid of some employees and open it up under a new name and start the production all over again. And but that's in 1955 was the first production of radioactive material on this site.
Oh my
And then
God.
in 1956 to 57, a contract between Mallinckrodt and Dow Chemical, who now owns this building, started producing uranium as well through a press. What they would do is they would take a round ingot, which is called a billet, and they would shove it through a press, and much like a Play-Doh play factory, whatever shape you put on the other side will come out, but X, a T, or a. In this case, they took it and they would squeeze it down into a rod, which later was used in nuclear submarines.
Wow.
Now, this wasn't depleted uranium that they processed. This wasn't enriched, but it was very high in U-235.
Wow.
Yes. In fact, it's very detectable in high numbers, directly over my head from where I worked all those years. It was still detectable in the dust in the year 2000.
Oh my goodness.
Up to 13.6 times above the safe limit.
Now, have they stopped?
Well, that's just it. From 1957 to 1960, this factory produced the uranium in this one building. While in the other building, they're melting the thorium. And the waste that's they created from this, remember, they're melting it in huge pots. So the sludge at the very bottom of it, when they're done, is radioactive sludge. And they scoop it out, and they put it in a pile. And after time, it starts piling up, and they have to find some place to put it. So they started piling it up on this empty lot next to these residents' homes.
Oh my gosh. Without any regard to human health. None whatsoever. There was no consideration.
In that contract, it said unrestricted use.
But that doesn't mean that
Literally.
they have to disregard human health. They have
You would
unrestricted use, but
well,
who are these human beings making these decisions?
Well, I'm certain most of these people back then are either long dead or so old they don't even remember if they do. And I'm sure none of them will ever go to jail for any of these decisions they made that affected and ruined so many lives. But we can't go back in time. I don't have a time machine. What we can do is try to find the good from that. And that is, first of all, find the information. You have to have proof. You have to have facts of these. These illnesses are caused by these contaminations. And the exposure levels and the amounts is very important to do this. Again, first thing you got to document is what did they run inside the factory.
You know what's the most unconscionable thing about this conversation that I find, Larry? We have known since the late 40s and early 50s that radioactive contamination 100% unequivocally causes harm to human health in a variety of ways. All of these production facilities intended for use for the military purposes, they knew going in that it caused harm. So it makes me angry every time I speak to an activist who's been affected like this
completely.
that says, we have to prove that our illnesses were caused by something we know that has scientifically been proven that causes this illness. I mean, it's a game of whack-a-mole that's unconscionable.
It is. It is.
And I want to thank you for having a beautiful attitude and a positive attitude and for persevering, because really in your little, as you said, your pinhole neck of the woods, your little 8 blocks or whatever.
Or 6 blocks, 8 blocks.
That you're concentrating on. Thank you. Really thank you for caring about your community and for your little area, because this is what it's going to take. So please do continue with your history on this plant, because this is very important.
Well, like I said, its production of uranium lasted for just about 4 years. And from documentation I acquired through the ex-employees and through the other FOIA and other information, it says that this factory processed this uranium. They ran 20 billets in a 24-hour period, 1 day a month. And I consulted a few people to discuss, the aspects, and they said, well, of course it will only be 1 day a month. There's a 28-day cool-down period. keep it from. If they ran all this in one time, the machine would be so radioactive you couldn't use it ever again. But by doing it a little bit at a time, well, nobody sees the accumulating factor. Even though it's the same amount of radiation, whether you run it all in the same month or if you just do it one day a month for 4 years, it doesn't matter. The same amount is still processed through this machine. And this cast iron steel machine, which is huge, it's almost the size of a small locomotive, is now radioactive. The steel soaked it up like a sponge, heating this radioactive metal up until it's steamed and smoked and running it through the die. It was heated up to over 1,000 degrees. So right there, it tells you heat rises, and so does particulates, and that's how the uranium dust got on the beams over my head in such high amounts.
Wow.
Again, no filters, no dust collectors. In the pot room where they melt this thorium, when I told you I sat there on my fork truck and watched them melt, well, there was no filters or dust collectors there either. It's just an exhaust fan.
Wow.
Blowing this radioactive smoke and dust out of, sucking it out of the building and letting it drift and blow across the residents' yards.
Pouring it into the community, no regard to filter at all.
No. So the waste site is almost an afterthought of their exposures if you think about it, because this uranium that was processed in my building on my press came out the windows and drifted across and landed in residents' yards. I know because we had radiation soil sampling taken, and it shows elevated levels of uranium. And it shows that it's the same type of uranium processed in our factory. I actually matched their samples with the samples that was taken over my head, and the spikes were identical. If it wasn't for the numbers, you couldn't tell them apart. I sent them down to a physicist to see if my theory was correct, and he says, yes, this uranium found in their yards is not a natural uranium. The U-235 is too high. Natural uranium in the United States wouldn't even be negligible. So right there, it proves that there was two types of radiation these residents were exposed to, as well as the employees, all because of this factory.
And the residents there don't have any idea, do they?
Don't have a clue. Remember, in that one radiation cleanup, they removed over 212 million pounds. It took them over 2 years. There was, and 1,000 rail cars. There was so much of it. And they never once put on their fence, danger, keep out, radiation, nothing. Over at Westlake Landfill, they at least have signs on their fence saying radiation area, keep out. Over here, they didn't want to put those signs up. Then they would know. And if they knew there was radiation, they would ask questions. And if they asked questions, litigation would follow. So these corporations, to keep from any lawsuits happening, didn't let the residents know what they were producing or dumping next to their home.
Wow.
And they got away with it up to now. And I'm doing my best to make sure their deadly secret doesn't stay a secret.
Now, who is responsible for making decisions whether they're going to help or not at that site, at the contaminated site now?
Well, I'm looking into several different aspects on this. For years, as a committee chairman on behalf of these residents over here in Venice, me and a co-worker, co-chairman, we've discussed different ways to go at this. And looking at Westlake Landfill's problems over and over and over again with the government to help them, we took a different road. We, for years, went through different attorneys, try to get them a civil compensation before we turned to our state government. Because, may you be unaware, here in Illinois, we don't have a balanced budget. We have no money. Our state may not have the funds to address this problem, let alone fix it. So I've been working for years through attorneys to try to get them some compensation, our committee, and we contacted 2 attorneys, and I'm hoping to they'll follow through with this and get them to.
Who are you going to take are you taking litigation to a corporation? I mean, let me see. Let me try to get this question out. The question is
civil action. I'm also going after him with a criminal. I've been talking to the Attorney General of Environmental Crimes here in Illinois, up in Chicago, and having him to go after these corporations on behalf of these residents.
Now, is this an active corporation?
In their yard. They are still responsible for it.
But that's my question. Is it an active corporation, or is it a corporation that's closed down and we're going to be chasing? I mean, have they closed? That's the game these people play. They open up these shell corporations. They produce all this contamination, close it down, and then they go, well, nobody's liable because of the corporate
I've been following
veil.
this quite closely, exactly what you're saying. Now, basically to bait the water, so these companies that are responsible are still responsible today, and they are all multi-billion-dollar corporations.
Give us names of these. Can you give us the names of the corporations?
Well, yes. Mallinckrodt Corporation themselves, for this uranium being in these residence yards, is at fault. They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. In fact, when I was learning to walk again because of my illnesses attributed to it, one of the medicines I took was morphine. And I remember looking at the bottle and seeing, wow, it's manufactured by Mallinckrodt. The company that poisoned me is now profiting from that illnesses. Wow. Talk about finding a market for your product.
Right, exactly.
But Mallinckrodt is the one that we would like to have them go after for these residents because they are the responsible party. Also, Dow Chemical, another multi-billion-dollar corporation who was responsible not only for the uranium, but the thorium production and all the thorium in their yards as well. And then we have the company that took over after that, which is called Consolidated Aluminum Corporation, or known as Canalco. Well, it was bought up in a merger with Alcoa, which is also a multi-billion-dollar corporation. So there's three big fish that these lawyers and state officials, government, can go after to receive money to help these victims and to remediate this area.
Do you have names of people who made decisions about this? Like, was this just, was it an intentional disregard for human health, or did the people who were running these corporations, do you have any indication that they knew the harm they were causing?
That is a good question, because I've always wondered, was this by design or is this complicated by accident? And, because of bureaucratic, right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing situation. And I always wonder, was there one, Mr. Burns sitting at the back of the desk, planning this, step by step, or was it just a happenstance to where, it just got shelved on the side and someone didn't see it?
But at this point, this is the thing. It really gets down to, we know we're causing harm to human health, and we can't make our billions of dollars without causing harm to human health. So how many people do we decide we can be liable for? How many deaths? It's kind of like Mike Papantonio talks about this. He's a litigation lawyer against the medical industry, and he talks about this all the time, how he's taken Bayer products to court many times, and he says they literally have a calculation. They have accountants calculating how many people is this medicine going to die. We know it's going to kill people. How many people will die before we get stopped in the courts, and how many people are we going to have to pay off before we can stop making profits?
A cost-benefit analysis, right. If it's cheaper to let the problem happen, let it happen. Yeah. That's exactly the way it is with this radiation. It won't be our problem in 40 years. Why do we care? Dow Chemical said that. Mallinckrodt said that.
What's really disgusting about that? In the case of uranium poisoning, yes, it is going to be their problem, because it's not just the people that are dying. This particular type of pollution has a tail that goes 8 to 10 generations and causes the worst effects and causes sterility.
If our government took a view of this as closely as, let's say, biological warfare or chemical warfare, where they know there is no winners in that battle of using that type of weapon, well, they would also understand that using this type of material is the same level.
I think they do know that.
It can cause the exact same issues, health problems, genetic issues down the road, much more severe than probably a mustard gas.
I think they do know. I think they do know, and I think that is why they're focusing so much scientific efforts into this nanotech technology where they're going to bioengineer human beings, because they know it's coming.
Well, they put nuclear reactors on submarines and ships. Now, here's something that's a war machine that's made to attract bombs and rockets. It's like flying a nuclear reactor airplane. It's inevitable. It's going to go off and cause, untold consequences that we haven't even thought of yet. And again, where the problem of this lies, it could happen in a harbor, not just at sea. There are so many different aspects of the not misuse, but the possible problems arising from the use. And again, back when they started working with this metal, they all said, we can do this. But they all should have took a step back and said, should we do this? Can't go back in time, but we can always, remember where the problem started.
It's so disgusting. I just looked up Mallinckrodt online, and do you know that Mallinckrodt stocks are up 5.85% this month, you guys? And they
good. Maybe more money for the residents and employees.
I mean, it is so outrageous that these people get to make billions of dollars. I mean, they're on the New York Stock Exchange making billions of dollars.
I would pay more than billions.
They're headquartered in Ireland, which is ironic because, Ireland is where they can't even eat the lamb.
Well, they diversified in medicines and stuff, like my drugs I had to take and purchase from them.
Wow.
Yep. So they're worth. They have more than enough money to go in with Dow and Consolidated Aluminum to go back and help these people living in these 6 blocks. I mean, if they could spend over $10 million to clean up this radioactive waste site, couldn't they do the same to clean up the radioactive waste out of the residents' yards? No. If they did that, it would be a mission of guilt.
That's right.
They ignored it.
Well, look, let's just talk. After watching that movie that I watched last night, and I highly recommend it. It's called Hot Water, and I just watched it last night. I'm really excited. I'm gonna reach out to the producer, see if she can come on the show. I don't know if I'll be able to accomplish that task, but one of the things that was really blew me away is how many sites there are. How many? And I think this is just the can of worms we have really, this movement to stop the uranium mining and to expose the cause to human health has really only taken shape since Fukushima took off. You know what I mean? Like people.
Yes, they do.
And
in fact,
so
I talked to someone about that issue. They were saying, why would they still be mining it if there's so much of it out there? Because there seems to be a question that nobody's asking. I mean, if they're dismantling nuclear warheads, and there should be more than enough feasible material for what they're producing. Why are they mining more? Where is it going? Who's it going to?
They're mining more for money. That's all it is. It's just a way to make money with. It's easy. It's built it's like the same reason they used your factory to start doing it, because the infrastructure was there. Let's use the products till they're beating the horse till it can't stand up anymore. Yeah,
exactly. The place got so hot, they sold it to a new owner. And when they started producing this material, what did they do? When it got too hot, they sold it to another company, and they started producing more material, and so on and so on. Same with my corporation. Now, they finally got the radiation licensing out of their name back in 2008, 2009, but the damage done up to that point is still there, still relevant.
Is that factory still in, is the factory where you worked, is it still open, Larry?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Are they producing uranium there, or what are they doing right now?
No, they're still melting magnesium in huge pots. And as far as I know, from the few employees I know that work there that I speak to, they haven't ran anything feasible. But something I found out over the years is that the half owner of this factory now, a British person who's a billionaire, owns a beryllium mine. Now, beryllium isn't radioactive per se, but it is much more toxic than lead, and it is a Category 1 carcinogen. Again, they melted it in these pots for 40 years, this beryllium. And again, it came out of the exhaust fans and drifted over everything.
Right.
And so, it isn't just one thing that they can attribute this to. It's all these corporations, all the neglect of all these companies over the years that caused this problem.
Right. Oh, I think this is the can of worms that they're really afraid. They just don't want to face it because they're gross negligence. If we were really to face this, these people should go to jail. They should be in The Hague.
Absolutely.
These are crimes against humanity, complete
but denial
disregard
and ignoring it has made it work so far. So it's a strategy that they're continuing with until they're forced to admit it.
See, this is my conversation. I think we need to forego the Nuremberg trials because Really, because this is what's keeping them in this is what's promoting the secrecy, is they're all scared to death that we're going to, like, the pitchforks are going to come out and we're going to string them up like they did, Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein or
Right.
something. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're so scared that as it is, people are beginning to get active. I mean, look at the Bernie campaign. Millions and millions of people are active. Even the Trump campaign, the burnt out Republicans. So people are really starting to go, wait a minute, we want our country back. And if they were to really face this, I think our conversation needs to be about reconciliation, like just going, okay, we're all responsible because we've all ignored it for 70
I
years.
agree. I mean, I'm responsible myself. I ran radioactive metal back in 1992.
Well, not just that,
through my
we've all
machine.
just sort of been
But I
ignoring
didn't know it. He didn't
whole-
tell me.
And
But
no, they're not telling us. But the thing is, we've all conveniently used all these products. So I think we need to have a little come to Jesus moment and say, you know what? Maybe the few egregious times when, this whole thing, gets into this conversation because here you are, a victim of these crimes against humanity. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like we're not going to really begin to get them to admit the issue unless we guarantee them immunity and let them go about their happy lives. Now, as a victim of their crimes, you might want them to spend some time in jail. So I don't know.
I would like to see that. But again, how would you find the right person and not their scapegoat?
Right.
Remember, they insulate themselves from liability in many different ways. And again, would that have changed anything? No, maybe not. But they can start by repairing the damage instead of placing blame. I'd rather find the person who did it after they fixed the problem.
Right.
It's like, we'll see what causes cancer. I said, well, no. Take the cancer out first, then find out what caused it. Same way here. See what these, fix the problems the corporations did wrong, then go back and find out who is the cause and go
Now,
after it.
speaking of the cause, those people working currently at that plant where you got sick, are any of those people getting sick? Is there any lingering effects of nuclear radiation in that facility?
Well, when I started getting ill and a few other coworkers, the company decided it was time to get rid of us, and they put us all out on strike. They gave us a contract that nobody would vote for. It had no seniority in it, which meant these guys that was there for 40 years could be laid off, and a new guy would take his place. And of course, they didn't want anybody to vote a new contract. They wanted to get rid of us. And now this company that's there today is non-union. So they can run anything or do anything, and nobody can ask questions. If they do, hey, they could lose their job. They have no union.
Oh.
So, they can do anything. They're almost like sweatshop slaves. And I hate to admit it, they may be ill and sick from it, and we have no knowledge, and they just ain't organized like we was as a union.
So they got rid of the unions, essentially, to keep people from talking.
Just so, and now the employee could...
That's what we call the right to work state, right? That's the right to work state, right?
Yes, it is.
That's what you get when you get right to work, folks. People that say they don't like unions, well, this is one of the big benefits of unions, is people get to really discuss and air the trauma that's caused by their employers that you don't get when you're non-unionized.
Well, my father, I worked with him for several years in another factory, about 6 or 7 years in a factory across the river, but I learned from him some work ethics, and one is you never depend on a union for your job. You show up on time, you do what you're told, and you leave on time. So I never depended on this union for anything. And then when I was on strike, remember I was ill at the time, this union was paying my utilities, they was paying my rent, they was even buying the medicines that I needed to keep me, alive.
So you were sick when you were on strike?
Yes, I told you. I was, the company knew I had help. In fact, my disability was dated to the last day I worked.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. It was
Wow.
backdated. So, again, finding it attributed to this is what we're working on now, and very close to a resolution. But that's just me.
And Larry, how long have you, again, remind our listeners, how long have you been working on this?
Well, it took me a year to learn to walk again after we went on strike and they got rid of me and everything else. And at that time, I was starting to lose the ability to walk and a lot of other things. And it took me a year to be able to walk again. And when I did, me and my wife asked our pastor if it was responsible of us to look for doctors and lawyers who could help us find the cause of our health problems. Because the first thing I found was the radiation over my head. And he gave us his blessing, which started the whole thing off. We started looking into, this was 2003. And,
now, can I ask you a question? This is a hypothetical, but if he would have said, no, don't pursue it, would you have not pursued it?
Maybe not at the time. That's a good question. I probably would have said, maybe he's right, maybe he sees something I don't. But it wasn't until the deaths of my grandchildren started happening over and over again, and the unexplained illnesses, attributed to my children, my wife, and then my coworkers. I was seeing mirror images in their health.
Can you share that with us? Because our listeners do not know what happened. What happened to your grandchildren and to your children?
Well, they have issues that on and off, but my grandchildren are the ones who suffered the most from this, which is very patternistic with radiation, with genetic damaging at genetic levels. In fact, I've seen a lot of grandchildren and children affected by this where the parents weren't. And our children and children with birth defects, stillbirths, premature, things of that nature. And with my coworkers, it's the same thing. I have one coworker, and he started working there, and he had 2 children who was born healthy and normal, and he started working with me on that press underneath that uranium dust. And his wife got pregnant, and 9 months later, when his child was born with serious health issues. In fact, today, he's on disability. He was on disability at age 10. And then I have another coworker who had 2 healthy children, a son and a daughter, and started working with me under that press also at the same time. And his wife actually got pregnant, had a son, had a birth defect. Again, we didn't notice this. It was like we was too close to the trees to see the forest. We had multiple issues starting to pop up around the factory. None of this was noticeable until I started stepping back in 2003, 2004, and looking into this. And once I see my problems and everyone else's and the correlation of it all, it just sort of fit. It was like the pieces of puzzles were going together.
Huh. Now, are your grandchildren still sick?
I have 2 that are healthy. I've been blessed. My son actually had one, and my daughter had one, finally. And we are, they're alive, they're healthy, and we couldn't ask for anything more. But it's these other victims, these other residents who's losing babies, who has health issues, who don't even know what could be the cause, who believe they may be the cause, blaming themselves. It's something I try to correct over the years with our committee, with people coming in, asking about their health issues, saying not to blame yourself, not to blame your family. It's a message we try to get across that, you're the victim, not the cause. Right.
Exactly. You're not the cause. That's the issue. This is the whole thing. I just looked up, at Mellencrot, the chairman of the board at Mellencrot, they're focused they are headquartered in Ireland, ironically. The man's name is Melvin Booth. He is the chairman of the board of Mellencrot. I think he deserves a letter.
That's what these corporations do now. You see, like Dow Chemical, what they'll do is they'll buy a cuckoo clock in Germany, and they'll make that the main corporation. And that way, if you want to sue Dow, well, you got to go through the cuckoo clock company.
That's right. That's exactly what they do. That's
and
exactly.
It's sort of a shell game. And I guess Mallinckrodt is, just as involved in playing around with their corporations and where the headquarters are based.
Ironically, Mr. Booth has a bachelor's degree in accounting from Northwest Missouri State University in Maryville, Missouri, where he was awarded an honorary doctorate of science degree.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. And he's responsible for poisoning a major portion of Missouri. It's outrageous.
And he's got a nice, shiny award and probably
That's
tenure
right.
to
He's a
back it up.
billionaire. Let's just be clear. He's super rich. I mean, this is the issue here. They are so separated from the harm that they're caused. They don't even take it personally.
Again, they think they're doing it on our behalf to help mankind. See, that's just it right there. They're more worried about mankind than a man or his wife or his individuals.
That's a good phrase. Say that again. They're worried about more mankind.
They're more worried about mankind than the individual man.
Yeah, that's
where they lost their perspective on, what they're doing to benefit mankind. You don't say, well, this will kill maybe 10 people, but if it doesn't, then we know we got something that works. Well, it ain't going to benefit those 10.
So, Larry, in this movie, The First Secret City,
Yes,
it is a documentary that has not really been well received. It's well received wherever it's been shown, but it hasn't been shown.
Shown limited, yes.
Yeah, and so
directors have a very close, tight grip on this film. She has copyrights to it, and
who is that? Who has this?
Alison Carrich. She's a wonderful person. Her and C.D. Stelzer,
right?
Producer. I want to let everyone know right now that they spent over 6 years filming this documentary.
Wow.
And that shows the level of their commitment and their compassion towards these victims over here in St. Louis.
Wow. I am excited to see it. I'm actually going to make an effort to connect with, we have some small movie venues here, the Bijou and the Metro. They're like a little alternative movie venues. I'm going to reach out to them and ask them to bring this movie over here to the Northwest, because I think the more we can get, and I think, this is why I'm bringing this up. I hope that our listeners will do the same in their own community. Look for alternative movie venues in your community and ask them, what's it going to take to get that movie here, and ask them to get in touch with C.D. Stelzer or Allison Garrick, because we need to see. It's like this movie I saw last night called Hot Water. It's available. Hot Water is available on Amazon, but I was blown away. Like, I can't wait to watch your movie. I was blown away at just this. What really
it's the best well-known secret.
Yeah, they know about it.
And it's best well known by these corporate owners, because they know what the secret is.
Yeah.
But it's well known by all of them.
Yeah, they know exactly what's going on. They know the harm they're causing, and they're just like, I guess they're hoping we're all just going to drop off like flies and they won't have to pay for it. I mean,
well, the tactic in the past has always been, well, we're a billion-dollar company. You don't stand a chance, and most people don't try. And that's the way they get away with most of it is, well, we're too big. You can't succeed. And so that's right off the bat. Most lawyers won't take a case against a billion-dollar corporation. So there's a lot of documentation, evidence, and proof you have to be able to get one of these companies to move against a billion-dollar entity. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, what's really interesting is we're never taught. This is one of the things John Goffman said in his book. In order for us to fight these nuclear monsters, we have to talk about the men. Like, we have to talk about Melvin Booth, who is the chairman of the board of Mallinckrodt. His name has to be well known. It's like David Koch right now. He made a complaint about a month ago, like, I don't know why people are always saying bad things about us. He's so completely disconnected from the harm he's causing, he cannot understand why people hate the Koch brothers.
I guess they can justify just about anything. Well, he died of heart cancer. Well, he died of this cancer. Well, he didn't die from radiation poisoning. But the mindset behind it is that's what caused the cancers.
Right.
But they just sort of don't see that far.
Ignore the reason that we have all these millions.
There you go.
Well, it's like that whole thing. I've sort of been on this people
they don't
around.
see the ghost behind them when they look at themselves in the mirror.
It's kind of like that phrase, background radiation. I have to say, I have gotten very annoyed quite recently with that phrase. Now that it firmly has planted in what it means. Background radiation is nuclear pollution from World War II. Let's be clear. They did all this nuclear testing in the 50s, in the late 40s and 50s. They bombed the daylights out of the entire northern hemisphere. That's the background radiation. It's nuclear pollution. It's not background radiation. We never had background radiation before.
Background is natural.
Background radiation, well, what
That's
they're trying...
You have to enhance background radiation, but they don't want to use that word.
Look,
again.
This is
questions lead to litigation,
right.
Avoid those problems.
It's not
Just
background radiation. It's nuclear pollution. Background radiation is not harmful. And what's caused the harm on our planet and caused the increase in cancer, genetic mutations, etc., and in fact is threatening all life on our planet is the nuclear pollution that they are summarily ignoring. All of these people...
God, in His infinite wisdom, told man, this radiation, there's a hot spot on this planet. There's where the radiation is higher than anywhere else. Well, nothing grows there. Why did he do that? Well, now man won't be walking around eating plants contaminated. This was sort of his infinite wisdom in the planning on how to keep man away from this stuff. Because if nothing grows there, he has no reason to go there. This goes back to an evolutionary level.
Yeah, it's such an outrage. I do have to say. It's like, so we have just a few minutes left. We have about 10 minutes left. What are your plans, or do you want to share them with us, or what's your next move, and where are you guys going? What's the status of where you're at now with your litigation and your pursuits to get justice for? Tell us the name of your little town again where you are.
Oh, okay. This is the town of Venice, Illinois, that's been contaminated. Now, this factory sits in Madison, which is sort of untrue. See, Madison owns this property in Venice on the other side of the tracks. And when they built this factory there, they flipped a coin, and Madison gets everything, all the tax money and revenue, where the town that this factory is actually located in don't get nothing except the pollution and contamination.
Huh.
So when they asked if they started dumping this radioactive waste on this lot and producing it inside this factory, the people on the other side of town, on a different town, said, "Well, go right ahead. It's not in our in our city. Go ahead." So they let them dump and produce all this stuff over in Venice for years and years and years for millions and millions in tax money.
Wow.
Now, Madison is one of the richest cities of its size here in Illinois, where Venice is one of the poorest. They didn't even have a gas station or a store until a few years ago. Over 2,000 people in this town, and there's just so many wheelchair ramps. It's sort of almost a tell of what's going on.
Wow.
Almost no one, 90% of the population, don't pay property tax because they live at or below the poverty level. Again, I believe associated with their health issues attributed to this factory. And every one of these residents I'm speaking of live downwind from this factory that produced this radioactive material for close to 50 years. So you don't make this stuff up. It's, documentation, proof, facts. That's everything I have to back up everything. You have to. It's the only way anybody takes it serious. And even then, as you say, they don't want to hear it.
It's so outrageous. It's like, it's just beyond unconscionable that there's a group of people, a small group of people.
Looking to represent the residents right now, and I hope it bears fruit. We'll meet with them again in a few weeks after reviewing everything. And I'm also working on a criminal level. I'm going to go after not only civil action, but criminal. I'm also speaking with the Attorney General up in Illinois, and he's overseeing what the federal EPA does, because we have them looking into wrongdoing by this corporation as well. Again, remember, we have soil samples showing radiation, elevated levels in their yards.
So before you even went to the government.
Right punch for the criminal and a left punch for the civil, that might help.
So let me ask you this, Larry. I hope you come back, because as we're speaking, there's so much. The questions keep expounding.
Oh, we just scratched the surface.
Really. So I please hope you do come back. But I want to ask you this. So you say you had your own soil samples. You got before the. Were they taken privately, or were these soil samples by the EPA?
Privately. The EPA refuses to test out there. We've asked them for years. We asked IEMA, which is Illinois Emergency Management Agency. They're the ones who actually handles radiologicals in the state. And their reasoning not to test is, we have no proof it left the site, therefore we have no reason to test.
Wow. And so when you got your private testing
but we have proof of 200 million pounds piled up 6 feet away from their homes, but they have no proof it left the site.
Now, have they tested since you guys got these private tests done?
Well, that's it. I've been leaving the state out of this and seeing if I can't go after them one more time on the civil suits with these attorneys. Now, if that fails, then I'll take it down a notch, and then I'll hand this into the... See, I don't want these residents to be evicted because their homes are radioactive, because they're poor and they have no place to go. I want to make sure they have some compensation or money before some type of action is taken on their behalf. So that's why, I'm still trying with the civil action to get some compensation for these victims. Now, I've never lived there. I've never had no family there, but we're related by not marriage or blood, but by this contamination.
Yeah, by uranium. You're related by uranium. I guess we're all married through uranium, aren't we?
Through exposure.
Yeah. This is so outrageous. Larry, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I mean, you have been after this fight, I heard, as you explained this, for at least 20 years now.
2003, 15,
right.
16 years.
So this is how long you've been actively engaged. Is that when you started?
Yes, 2003 was when I first looked it up on our computer about radiation in our factory. And that's when I first, like I said, right after I learned to walk again, I wanted to see if there was a connection. And boy, did I find something. Did I find more than I ever thought.
Wow. Well, look, I hope you will come back and share more of this information with us. Is there any direction that any of our audience members could do to help support you in any way? Is there something that any of us could do to encourage you, or do you have like a fund set up where people could contribute a GoFundMe page or anything like that?
Actually, no. I don't even own a computer. I don't own a radio. I don't own a car. I don't own a cell phone. Me and my wife are both living on disability. We live at the poverty level. And all I do have is a phone. So if I do need information off a computer, I call someone who has one, or go over to their house, or go to the library. There's ways of getting around of doing things. I wish someone healthier, wealthier, and wiser than me would have been able to do this, but there was no one else out there. But if it shows the level I can accomplish of all the information and documentation I've been able to acquire with just a phone, think about what the average person out there listening to this can do, who has something as simple as a cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
They can look up information that would take me a week to find.
Mm-hmm. This is so amazing that here you are with no modern resources. Most of us are
Old school. Yep.
The concept that you could actually pursue this litigation without constant access to an internet, to the emails, to what we consider to be normal life now, really speaks to your perseverance, Larry.
Well, I actually had to lower myself to their level. Back then, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have a lot of this. So I had to go through old paperwork and dusty shells and get asthma,
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of a give and take. There's some things you can do. There's some you couldn't. You had to just, roll up your sleeves and boots on the ground.
Right. Well, that is really, this is when people say they can't do it. It means that they don't really have the perseverance, because really, how many people are you litigating on behalf of?
At one time, there was 1,200 residents signed up with the attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Last time I talked to him, the last time I took account.
So there's 1,200 people. And what's the population of this little town where you're at?
2,000.
So it's a little tiny.
More than half the people and remember, so far. And
wow.
We have 75 cancers in just 2 blocks next to this factory in the wayside. There's only 35 homes.
And the government is doing nothing. That's
we have 360 in 6 blocks, and all downwind from this factory.
Honestly,
I know. You can't find the words to explain this.
It's unconscionable. It is completely unconscionable. So it's so outrageous.
But again, we can't change what has happened. I can only keep going forward to find some answers and compensation for these people. Try to repair their lives the best we can, and then hold the people accountable who did it. If not, we'll try to do both at the same time. That's why I'm saying I'm going after them with civil and criminal, if I can.
And I think we really need to change the culture of these people working for these corporations into just saying, well, we can't face it. Yes, they can face it. These corporations,
yes,
they can face it, and it's not the worst thing in the world. It might cost them a bit of cash, but to just help remediate and compensate the people. But they're still going to be filthy rich. They're still going to be multi-billion corporations. So it's not like we're asking them to close their doors and close up shop. We're helping them to compensate people that they actually caused to be sick and destroyed their quality of lives.
Well, these owners of these corporations don't care much about the earth when they're up in their corporate jets overhead.
Well, I think it's time for us to start. I mean, I know for myself, I'm going to write Mr. Melvin Booth and ask him about what he's doing about St. Louis and about your little town and about all these, little places where
they're also responsible for Westlake. Much responsible. Oh.
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, even what happened to you, the way they disregarded it, sold off this, sold off that. I mean, really seriously, what's happened to your lives is, in fact, caused by them.
They say they don't know exactly what's buried there. Now, is this because they planned it that way and got rid of records, or was it that stupid they didn't actually care and take count of what they was dumping? Either way,
you know how easy it is. They take a soil sample and calculate what is there. How hard is that? They could figure out.
Well, that's it right there. It would take a lot of testing, a lot of probing, and there would be different levels, different radiation readings, different types of radiation. Oh my Lord, it would be.
Imagine if we did that everywhere.
Well, during the Fukushima incident, the fiasco would be a better word. Over here in Illinois, they put up monitors to monitor radiation here in Illinois, coming from Fukushima, which really upset me because for years we had been trying to get the EPA out there to test for radiation for these residents, and they've been saying, oh, there's no harm from it. Yet here they are setting up detectors for radiation halfway around the planet.
Did they find radiation from
6,000 miles away than 60 feet away for these residents?
Did they find the radiation from Fukushima?
No. If they did, I didn't find any.
No.
If they did, they didn't discuss it with no one.
No, that's on a need-to-know basis, and we don't need to know. Wow.
Right.
And they actually made that just points to the ridiculousness of the EPA. They know exactly what's out there.
Why would they go through the trouble of doing that if there was no reason to? There was a reason, and
they know what they're doing.
They won't tell us. Doesn't mean there wasn't one.
What they're doing is using these as different ways to try to figure out another way to lie to us and offer us up to the money gods. It's just no end
that they wouldn't test here, 60 feet away, but they will 66,000 miles away. It's just the irony.
Well, what they're trying to do, I mean, let's be clear. Fukushima is a clear and present danger to the entire northern hemisphere.
Still today.
Right. It's a nuclear volcano, essentially.
Oh, they really should check debris floating out the Atlantic waste island out in the middle of the ocean. I'm sure a lot of that is radioactive.
I'm sure they are checking the debris, and I'm sure
but
most
again,
of it
they ain't
is.
telling nobody.
Right. They're not telling us. We're on a need-to-know basis. And, I mean, it's almost as if they're going to allow the entire human species to die from nuclear pollution, and they're not going to tell us about it. I mean, it's...
Well, they will at the last minute, just like with, global warming, Well, when it's undeniable, then they'll agree. Just like radiation. As long as there's money involved, there's someone who's going to say it's okay.
Well, Mr. Melvin Booth...
if you took the value away from it, it would end overnight.
Uh-huh. They know exactly what they're doing. These people at Mellencrat know exactly what they're doing. The people at Dow Chemical know exactly what they're doing. They know that they're killing people. They know exactly what they're doing.
They created the word radiotoxic.
Really? Did they really?
When they first started, remember, St. Louis is the birthplace of radioactive production and radioactive waste. In 1938, they had a first sustainable nuclear reaction in Chicago. Well, that feasible material was made here in St. Louis at Mallinckrodt.
Wow.
And because of that, they had to get rid of that factory and build a new one at Weldon Springs. Well, that was called the Clean Building. Why? Because the other was radiotoxic, high levels. They didn't know anything about safety when they first started working with this material, and they started learning gradually how dangerous this was as they were producing it. Radiotoxic is a word I learned from an environmentalist here in St. Louis, someone who I looked up to by the name of Kay Dry. She's been an anti-nuclear environmentalist for
I interviewed
years.
Kay. I should have her back on.
She's wonderful. She's also in this documentary.
Yes, I know. She's really, really done all she could to help the people of St. Louis and get this issue out in the forefront.
Bless her heart. She has for many years
Yes.
dedicated her life to this. And,
yes.
and
you know what? This is what we need. We need to respect the efforts of Kay Dry and the people that have worked with her by all of us getting on board and doing what we can. And we have about 30 seconds left. Larry, I will have you back on. I am so grateful that you shared this hour with us. Thank you so much for all that you do. My hat is off to you, honestly. I encourage everybody, put your courage feet on, take action. Let's write Mr. Melvin Booth a letter at Mallinckrodt and tell him to face up to the harm they've caused all across the United States of America. So put your courage feet on, you guys. We will talk to you Wednesday. Thank you, Larry Burgen, for joining